2, 3. Na, 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 na,
All right, first question. First question comes from Megan. If agencies have the same bill rate, why do they have different pay packages for the same job?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you for asking your question, Megan. So I'm going to start a little bit big picture, and then we can dive into the different reasons this happens all the time. Big picture, bill rate is going to be the amount of money that the hospital is paying for a traveler to come work for them. It's paid per hour, and it's paid straight to the staffing agency. The staffing agency takes that bill rate amount of money, and they keep some of it to run their business, and then what's left over is considered the pay rate. That's what we get. So here we are at the pay rate, and Megan's probably looking at job boards or even talking to different recruiters and sees the same job, and she's being offered 2 different pay packages.
Mm-hmm.
First thing I'm going to, there's so many different avenues we can go with this. There's so many reasons this happens. Number 1 is probably where are you getting that information, potentially. So if she's looking at job boards, one thing that I know we can relate to and we see very strongly at Nomadicare is job boards are not always exact pay packages. A lot of times they're estimates. So if Megan is just looking at job boards and trying to compare pay packages, when she talks to the actual recruiter, it might actually be higher or lower than what it says on the job board. Also, sometimes job boards will post in the net amount, what she'll get after taxes, and sometimes it's posted for the gross amount, what she makes before taxes, and that can be confusing. Sometimes it includes benefits, sometimes it doesn't. So I would say number 1 thing for people to look at is, are you comparing what, like apples to apples? Are you actually seeing the full true pay package when everything is actually combined and set in the same way?
Okay.
So
It's like a gross weekly estimate.
this is
right?
a great way to look at it.
It's a very common way to job boards display is like
Yeah.
how much is the estimated gross for this job? But what if estimated grosses are different for the same job? Why would that be?
Yeah. Well, so then it comes down to somebody typically really is paying more or less than the other one, even when you're comparing. It's just sometimes the difference isn't as big as it seems on job boards. But when it comes to that, then there is one reason that could be the staffing agency just takes more than the other staffing agency. They have different profit margins.
Mm-hmm.
And so that could be one reason. Another reason could be because they actually have different bill rates that they're playing with. So let's say one company has a direct relationship with that hospital. They actually get the full bill rate. And then if they can't find a traveler to get in that spot, the next staffing agencies, they all get essentially a different bill rate. They have to pay that first.
You're talking about what like a VMS, right? Where agencies may have to pay a fee to staff you in that job, where the company who has that direct relationship does not have to pay a fee.
Yeah,
So
pretty much. Yeah.
Say for easy math, because I'm not good at math, if the bill rate was $100, agency 1 would have a $100 bill rate, but say the agency 2 had to pay a 3% fee, they'd have a $97 bill rate.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So they could start with different amounts. So even if they're both taking 20% cut, one of them can pay more.
Yeah.
Now, in reality, that's not how it goes. A lot of times that second tier staffing agency that is only starting with $97, many times they pay more than that first one that has the $100 bill rate in that example, because the top one keeps more money and the bottom one has, the other one, the $97 one, has lower overhead expenses. So a lot of times it comes to how much is the agency keeping versus how much are they paying you as the traveler.
Yeah,
What-
there's
yeah.
margins. Things that come to my mind are margins, overhead costs, and fees.
Mhm.
Those are probably the most common things that I've seen. There's also that plays off the margins is the individual recruiter, right? Like testing the waters to see what they can start with, and then maybe they start real low on an offer, right? That's saying like, hey, I can probably get someone to take this job for $1,900 a week, but I know I can go up to $2,100 a week versus agency, D or whatever, the recruiter just maybe like, hey, I can give $2,100 a week. I need to fill this role right away. I'm going to post $2,100. And so as a traveler, you say, why is that one $1,900? This one's $2,100.
Yeah.
Could just be the recruiting style too. So, I mean,
Yeah. And
yeah.
the recruiters right now are definitely still salespeople
Mhm.
in the industry, in almost all the staffing agencies.
Yeah.
There's some exceptions. And so with that, the recruiter is the salesperson and they're incentivized to get you in a job, mostly because they get a commission. And so, yeah, a lot of times they know the company would love to have more profits. Of course, they're also wanting you to say yes to the job. So that's where the negotiation might come in and why you'll see different pay rates, because different recruiters will try different tactics. And then you as the traveler might have to negotiate to get that
Yeah.
a different pay.
Yeah. I've also seen, because we run a marketplace of jobs, dozens of agencies, right? And I've even seen trends where staffing agencies are not technology companies. They're not great mathematicians, right? They're not extremely well versed at calculating a very accurate pay package. And so what I've seen happen is like they kind of have these systems for calculating estimates instead of like trying to find the exact amount. And so you'll see a lot of jobs that are like bucketed within this pay range. So if it's like a PT in Northern California in outpatient, it's typically bucketed in this estimate, right? Where then once you talk to that recruiter, the recruiter then goes, okay, cool. Here's the actual bill rate. Here's the actual target margin we're trying to get as an agency. Here's the costs associated with this job, the overhead costs, right? So yeah, there's so many factors that go into it. But yeah, Megan, is a good question. I mean, different margins from agencies. You were talking about overhead costs of agencies. And what we mean by overhead costs, right, is if it's a 3-person agency, your costs are literally low, right? You only have 3 recruiters on staff. You probably have a small office or your remote team. But if you're a giant mega staff agency, you may have hundreds and hundreds of recruiters. You may have multiple giant offices across the nation, right? Like a lot of expenses. And so then you have to pay for that, right? And so then you bake in your cost to do business into how do you calculate a pay package for a traveler. And so that's always like the give and take, right? Do you go work for a big giant agency who has access to a ton of jobs but has higher overhead costs and probably higher margins? Or do you go to the boutique smaller agencies that maybe have lower overhead costs and give a little bit back to the agency, but they don't have as many jobs, right? They maybe just have a couple in a small little geographic area. So
and I will say that that is quite there's a little bit of truth to that, but it's also a bit of a stereotype, because a lot of the times what we see too with our data is sometimes the really big companies do pay well. And some of the small companies that you think you're brand new, like you need something to attract the travelers to work with you over a company with lots of jobs. Sometimes they pay worse margins. And what's interesting, we've done a little bit of staffing at Nomadicare with strikes and stuff like that, just enough to kind of see for ourselves. Workers' comp cost a lot more when you're brand new than once you've done it for a while. They'll give you discounts because they can see how you run your business. So it's more expensive at first when you have less people, because you have to pay this huge liability, whether you have 100 people working or 10 people that year, huge liability bill. And then the other thing, health insurance is so expensive to offer when you're small, and it gets cheaper with scale. So there's also a lot of things that cost a lot of money when you're small. And if you don't staff a lot of people, it's more expensive per person. So I think there is
economies of scale, right?
Totally. And then some of the biggest companies are publicly traded. So they have to have a certain profit margin for their stockholders. Some other huge companies are privately owned. They might can pay more. So I think it's just, I hear that a lot, especially with newer travelers. Like the small companies will pay more, the big companies pay worse, but we don't find that correlation to be perfect. So I would be careful if you're a new traveler and you're thinking about this. Don't think, oh, I won't work with the huge companies because they don't pay as well. A lot of times they do, and they've got tons of jobs, and they're worth talking to as well.
Amazing point. Cool.
Yeah.
Great question, Megan.
Yeah, thanks, Megan.
Nice to meet you, hello. Never been here before, but I feel like I'm home. Yeah. Put my feet on the road, meet me over the coast. We got places to